different alternative mitigation policy scenarios for Mumbai metropolitan region. And in the next session, Dr. Anush Chandrappa from IIT Bhubaneswar School of Infrastructure, he and his team will be presenting a case study on utilizing waste cooking oil in the asphalt mixtures. So which will be a circular economy approach, and which will be using the materials. It's like the waste cooking oil in improving the asphalt quality. So in turn, decarbonizing the system. So we'll wait for a few times so that we'll have all the participants join shortly. Okay, sir.
So the speaker for this session, Professor Munish Chandel, he is joining in a couple of minutes.
So meantime, participants, if you have any questions, queries, or suggestions from previous sessions, or if you can share some viewpoints with us on what are your expectations, that would be great.
So yes, anyone, as Ravi mentioned, anyone if having any suggestions.
No suggestions yet.
We are in the middle of this 5-day program. So if you can let us know your suggestions, like whether it is going okay, we should do it slightly differently. Any suggestions is welcome. Like, feel free to give your feedback.
If there are no suggestions, there are few take homes for you. It's like IIT Kharagpur, or in the environmental engineering and management, our circular engineering group is working on n number of activities associated with the waste management, focusing on capacity building, which you are seeing huge amount of research is going on in the domains of sustainability, waste technologies, resource recovery, then and specifically in the advanced technologies like hydrothermal carbonization, bioplastics, and freight and transport of the plastics. So multiple aspects are being researched out. So this is one segment that which has come out of a project work which is being done. And similarly, we are extending the services to all to like take over on understanding the systems through different companies and to different industries, and bridging the gap between academia, industry, and the government. So anyone who is interested to work with our laboratory are most welcome, and you can drop your messages to Professor Brajesh Dubey or his phone or the email. So do feel free. It need not be as of now. Whenever an idea comes for you, yes, the laboratory is always ready to extend its hand and contribute to the development of environmental systems, specifically focusing on the waste systems in this country.
Yeah, Professor Munish Chandel has joined.
Yes.
Yeah. Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon, sir.
So should we? Yeah, we can start. So Ravi, go ahead and.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
So welcome, sir, and welcome all the delegates for the afternoon session of the day 3 on the capacity building workshop on decarbonization of Indian transport systems. So now we'll be very happy to invite our keynote speaker, Professor Munish K. Chandal, who is a professor at Environmental Science and Engineering Department, Indian Institute of Technology, Bombay. And his research interests includes climate and transport, greenhouse gas mitigation, sustainable development, waste energy and access, and solid waste management and waste energy. Professor Chandal has received BTech degree in civil engineering from NIT Hamirpur and PhD in environmental engineering from IIT Delhi. He was assistant professor at civil engineering department IIT Roorkee before joining IIT Bombay. Professor Chandal has more than 16 years of research and teaching experience. He has published more than 80 research publications in different journals and conferences, and he has been associate editor of 2 journals. We welcome you, sir, and the platform is for you to deliver your talk.
Okay, thank you for such a nice introduction. I hope I am audible to everyone.
Yeah.
Yes,
आपकी स्लाइड अभी स्लाइड शो पे नहीं आई है केवल. Slide is still on the normal mode, not in slideshow mode. Now it is there.
So, yeah, you know, seminar, working on a very relevant area. You know, we are trying to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions from all sectors and try to move towards zero emissions. So therefore, we have to identify all the sectors where we can reduce the emissions or even more than the zero itself, so that there is net emission is zero. So in this decarbonizing India's transportation system, I will today present my work on urban transport emissions under current and alternate mitigation policy scenarios for the Mumbai metropolitan region. So a brief background for this project. We started this project a few years ago. It was a consortium project funded by Research Council of Norway and IIT Bangalore, IIT Bombay, IIT School of Planning and Architecture, Delhi, Kerry, and then some international partners were the part of the consortium. And the idea was to develop a framework for to reduce the greenhouse gas emissions to a level where we can, and find actually the methods and pathways, or maybe the policy intervention methods, so that we can bring down our greenhouse gas emissions, as well as to get into the adaptation strategy. So I today only will talk about how the mitigation is possible, and how the different policies would change it politically. So let me start. So, for example, in this study framework, the idea was to estimate the greenhouse gas emissions, carbon dioxide, and other emissions from the transport sector, not for today, but also for the future. And the reason was I already mentioned to you. Then how did we approach this project? So in this project, there was a business as usual scenario. That means what if we keep on doing the things we are doing, versus if we have specific policy interventions or specific policy interventions, so that whether they can bring down the emissions further down. So as you can see, this was based on base year travel demand model. The base year was taken 2005, and then horizon years was 2031 and 2050. And for those horizon years, we estimated the travel demand, and based on that, what would be the greenhouse gas emissions and other pollutants coming from this sector. So study area was Mumbai metropolitan region. As many of you are aware, this is a big metropolitan region. It has 8 municipal corporations as well as 9 municipal councils, along with that 1,000 plus villages. And the whole area is around 4,000 square kilometer, with the estimated population around 21 million. Okay, so this is what is the transport modeling framework for this study. As I mentioned, the base year travel demand model was used for 2005, and then the scenarios, the transport scenarios or travel demand scenarios were generated for 2030 and 2050. And then there were alternate policy scenarios for the horizon years. And those alternate policy scenarios were based on how if there is a redistribution of policy, if there is a low population increase, and if there is a intervention and specific improvement in transport infrastructure, and how about if there is a specific policy on travel demand management. And then the last one was to improve in technology. Then there was also what we call the policy bundle scenarios, in which we have added a few types of policy scenarios together. For example, in policy bundle 1, 3, and 4 was agglomerated or put together. And similarly for policy bundle 2, it was 2, policy 3, policy 4 scenarios all put together. So basically, the idea was to find that what kind of policy would be a better policy for a city like, for a region like MMR. So if you see, many of you may be familiar with the travel demand modeling. It's a very exhaustive analysis and required a lot of data. So we used this CTS data, which study was done for MMR, and that data tells us almost a lot many information. It's based on different surveys, economic, social, travel demand, trip generation, where the most of the trips are, what is the transportation of vehicles, what is the transportation mix, all kind of information related to the transportation is captured in this CTS study done from MMR, very exhaustive study, I would say. So obviously we use this secondary data based on that study for our analysis, for our modeling. So the first part of this travel demand modeling was to have trip generation and calibrate that trip generation, and then distribute it, again calibrate it, and then using the model split, and then the fourth component is trip assignment, and that has different steps of validation at different levels, checking if the model is fitting or no, and so on and so forth. A very exhaustive work, and thanks to the secondary data available, otherwise it couldn't have been possible. So based on that, now we have a base year travel demand model approach, and using 4-stage travel demand modeling, we could get the trips at different routes, number of trips, number of vehicles, the trip length, and the mix, etc. Now, for the forecast, we use once the travel demand model was ready and validated, and we used the the forecast, and the first one was for business as usual scenario. So this is based on projected population and employment for MMR, incorporating proposed road infrastructure, because there is already different plans for incorporating metros, for incorporating different highways, different bridges, etc. So whatever was already proposed and as accepted as a part of the plan, that was incorporated to this. And then you may be knowing that earlier we were not having before 2010 no metro, no monorail, but then we have all these two new transit mode as well. So that were also incorporated into that. So just to give you a sense, for example, the employment forecast and the population forecast was something that from 20.8 million would be around 27 million in 2021, and then 20 or around 50 million population around 2050. And this annual growth rate was expected 1.9, and then 2.3, and then again 1.9. These informations are available in the CTS report. And then based on that, also employment, because employment influences the big deal with the transportation systems in the city. And that also was around 2.4, 2.5% initially, and then is assumed 2.2%. Now, if you see based on this modeling, you can see the mode share, the base year as well as horizon years, and how it would change. For example, the mode share of car as compared to 2005, it would be changing, would be increasing up to 7, and then maybe around 9.75%. And then the two-wheeler would be increasing from 9.8% to around 12, and then again going down in terms of the percentage share. Auto going down, taxi a little bit less, but the train also going down. But then there is a big increase in the metro, because there was no metro 2.5, then 33% contribution and 38% by the 2050. And that would influence the bus transport as well as the train transport, and however the cars anyway are increasing in this particular scenario. So not only the mode share, but also the vehicle kilometer travel has been forecasted to increase considerably. For example, if you see around as compared to 2005, it's going to be around, I don't know, 4 times increase as compared to 2005 in 2031, and the vehicle kilometer travel, it would be on 6 to 7 times or even more as towards the end of 2050. So there is a considerably increase in the transportation system in terms of the vehicle kilometers travel. Now that was for the business as usual scenario. Now the second part of this was proposed mitigation policy scenarios. What kind of mitigation policy scenarios would or could be adopted so that it reduces the leakages, it reduces or it encourages the public transport, or so there could be n number of ways to handle this. So we have these 5 policies. First one called population redistribution. Then the second one is low population redistribution. And third one, improvement in transport infrastructure. And then fourth one is the travel demand management. And the fifth one is the improvement in technology, basically incorporating electrical vehicles. Now, as in addition to this CTS document, there are other reports. One of them was Metropolitan Regional Plan 2016 to 36. And what it was basically put into that report text that, whatever is proposed and assumed in CTS report is not going to be the same, and there are going to be many different changes. For example, one aspect of this Mumbai Metropolitan Regional Plan was that there will be less growth than what is projected in CTS, and some CTS proposal would be already implemented, and while others may be that modifications. And in the regional plan, there are proposals to have new regional industrial zones. So it's very interesting how these kind of proposal, or how you kind of you can, yes, city centers development can lead to the change in the transportation system and overall to the emissions. So in this, for example, there were 4 new growth centers proposed, one in Vasai, one in Bhiwandi. The third one is in Kalyan, and the fourth one in Bandel. So these 4 new growth centers are proposed and was thought to be the part of the future in case of this MMR. So what we did then, we did the population redistribution based on the new policy or the draft plan. There, because of what happens is then, if you say there will be change in the city or what you call industrial or the growth center, it will lead to many times movement of or you can say the decondition of the main central hub. In this case, for example, the southern Mumbai, or which we call basically Bombay. So because of change in population redistribution, there will be change in the population in different parts, different units in different municipal corporations, and that was incorporated. And we also said that what if we put low population or like this, but then there is no augmentation of transport. There is no augmentation of transport infrastructure, but population remains same, and then there is redistribution of population because there is a change in the what you call the different kind of city centers. So what this was this policy 1, and then the policy 2 was exactly what was in the regional plan. It says there will be less population increase. For example, you can see in policy 2 is around 58 million versus 34 million, and it's around 50 million versus 33 million. So you can say population 2 is a low policy distribution scenario. So based on that, there was also modification in the transport infrastructure. There are some additional suburban railways, Panvel to Karjat, Panvel to Roha, and some additional metro which were not earlier parts. There are already few metro lines, and there were additional one, and then a couple of tunnels. There are 3 bridges which were put as per this metropolitan regional plan. So this is how it looks like. Then the policy 3 was a different scenario which says improvement in public transport infrastructure. So public transport infrastructure can be improved in many ways, but then we do not have all the options or all the capabilities to model it. So what we model is that as this is also part of planning basic development plan, it says that we will have bus rapid transit system or BRTS network in 4 multi-lane highways of Mumbai. Jogeshwari Victoria Link Road, Western Expressway, Eastern Expressway, and Eastern Railway, all 4 major connecting links for Mumbai. So what we propose is that there will be dedicated rapid transit system or BRTS network made on those highways. Okay. So that was the one policy aspect. The next one was travel demand management. What is the meaning of travel demand management? You must have heard, or there are many ways of travel demand management. For example, you may see in some places there will be in big cities there will be specific times for truck to enter into the cities, or the goods carrier into the cities. The heavy vehicles cannot enter. So this is one way of, or for example, one you can see in Delhi was odd even cars and number of, and then there are uh, high parking fees in specific areas and change with time. And you can increase the registration cost, for example, if you buy a car already anyway, MMI comparatively registration cost is high. They can be further increased, and of course, you can increase the fuel prices, parking charges, or maybe introduce the congestion pricing for different hours of the. So how did we model it? We model it in a two policies, what we call policy 4A and policy 4B. So in policy 4B, we model it in such a way that you give that a combined effect of parking, congestion pricing for private vehicles would be such that they have to pay extra for in different way, maybe in terms of fuel, in terms of congestion pricing, in terms of parking, or even maybe in the registration. So what we assumed is that there would be increase in private operating costs by 60% in Greater Mumbai. What is Greater Mumbai? You can say the South Bombay in a sense, the main Mumbai district. Even only in that, there will be additional operating costs of 60%. And in the policy B, we realized that, okay, there can be another scenario which maybe the cost for private owning and not owning, but operating a private vehicle would be higher, and it could be uniformly distributed for the whole MMR region, not only the Greater Mumbai. Then that we assume that what would be that extra cost, and that we assumed was to be 10% addition as compared to what otherwise someone would pay in the business as usual scenario. So after that, there was the next scenario was improvement in technology. And what kind of improvement? There could be n number of types of improvement. But so, for example, what we added is EVs. And in EV, what we said that there will be 40% share of electrical vehicles among all four-wheelers and three-wheelers by 2030. And then it would further increase to 100%. And similarly, all two-wheelers, 80% of them would be electrical by 2030, and they will increase to 100% by 2050. Yeah, so anyway, it's already moving in that direction, fortunately. So maybe the BAU itself will become a policy 5 scenario in future. Also, we integrated these different policies. So that means we run policy 3 and 4 together, policy 2 plus 3 plus 4 together, which essentially means that policy bundle 2 tells the local population redistribution, as well as some kind of intervention of having a BRPS system, and also would be having a policy 4, which essentially means the congestion pricing. If we compare now the BAU and policy studies, so now the question is, what would be the benefit of these policies if we incorporate? So in this case, for example, this graph, very simple, very informative graph, which shows the mode share of BAU versus policy scenario. So that is for year 2030. So if you see, somehow the cars remain same, very little up and down, and then there was increase, or you can say the two-wheelers also not change from one policy aspect to another policy aspect. What you can notice very clearly is considerably change in the bus usage, and maybe even because of if we have scenario which is uh, promoting bus system or VRTS system, it would take some people from train, some reduction in taxis, some in auto system, very little, but still the reduction in the car, maybe 1% at max. So these kind of policy intervention essentially can change or alter our watt share and therefore the emissions occurring from in the city domain. Similarly, for by 2050, again, except the policy one, it will be really increase in metro because that's going to be one of the optimal one solution. But the buses would significantly increase, and if we find those scenario that also would lead to increase in buses to a degree as compared to policy two scenario. Cars amount similar, two-wheeler similar, auto in policy some reduction. Monorail, of course, their share will be less than 1% because of the limited usage and the only one network going on. Then, how about the VKTs, the vehicle kilometer travel? So, if you see, there will be increase in VKT in some cases, and the policy one is the scenario where we said that there will be population redistribution, but not augmented with additional transportation infrastructure. So you can see that there will be a little bit more chaos in a sense, but and more travel, I would say. But for example, if you incorporate several of these cities together, you can see London 2, for example, which will considerably reduce your VKTs in 2030 as well as in 2050. So as compared to BAU, you will see considerably decrease in the VKTs, and also somewhat the other policies also would use the vehicle kilometer travel. Now what do we have now? We know that we have a mode share. We know how many kilometers of each type of vehicles we are going to have or would be traveling. Now the question is the emissions. What would be the emission from those automobiles, from metro, from the monorail, from the rail, and that will vary on different assumptions. How will we produce our electricity, because railway lines, metro, and as well as your what you call electrical vehicles, they all will be using electricity. So now the question is, for electrical vehicles, what will be the emissions, and not the direct emission, but of course the indirect emissions, and that will be influenced by your electricity, how we generate electricity. And similarly for automobiles, the emission would depends on what kind of automobiles we have. We already, many of the vehicles by 2030 will have para stage 6. So therefore, we have to see the mix of the vehicles. But remember, if we all vehicles by 2030 are para stage 6, so still the many of vehicles which are 10 years old or even this, so they will be depending upon their age, the what we call vintage. They will be having different emissions and different this thing. And again, we have a lot of CNG buses, but then what would happen to them? That kind of consideration is very complicated, honestly, but that's what we thought of the estimated planning. So as we know that there are different types of emissions, carbon dioxide, NOx, carbon monoxide, hydrocarbon, particulate matter, and we calculated those emission factors for these 5 pollutants for different types of vehicles. So in case of conventional or IC engine vehicles, we took cars, taxis, two-wheeler, three-wheeler, buses, LCV and HCVs. And for electrical vehicles, we took cars, two-wheelers, three-wheelers, and of course, rail, mono and metro rail, and suburban railway, and also the buses. So I hope everyone is on the same page. If someone has a question, can we just stop for a minute, and someone want to ask, we can stop there for a minute. Okay, in case there is no question, let's continue. In case of, so basically there are emission factor estimation for two types of vehicle, IC engine based vehicle or electrical vehicles of different types. So for internal combustion engines, the emission factors for these conventional automobiles, they are based on study done by ARAI. Basically, they have some emission factors. So we try to use them in a different manner. And then the important thing is that what is the age of the vehicle and what is the mix of this? For example, how many CNG buses, how many electrical buses, how many diesel engine buses, what stage is it, Euro 6, is it Euro 5, or 5 is anyway not there, or is it Euro 4. So we consider the vintage of the vehicles, the technology they are using, and estimated the average emission factors based on the mix of their age. So, for example, if you go by 2030, it could be that maybe 50% of your buses would be Bharat Stage 6, but maybe still 10-20% of us would be Bharat Stage 4, and maybe very limited would be just Bharat Stage 2. So that needs to be considered, and that changes with when we change from 2020, 2030, 2050, because that mix will change. Okay, so that was the for the internal combustion engines, and for the electrical vehicles, so we have to calculate how much is the electricity efficiency and what are how much, that means how much electricity they will use for per kilometer of travel, and what and also that how much will be the emission for each unit of electricity produced. Okay, and then therefore and other vehicles. So for example, now the question was that what will be the electricity grid mix? That means how will we generate our electricity in future? So there are some studies. For example, what we use is based on the IEA, International Energy Agency study. They have forecasted, I think, to 2030. We simply used it, linearized it for 2050, which essentially says that what will be the energy mix or electricity generation mix in India. So if you can see here, for example, despite of many of our efforts, fortunately or unfortunately, we would still be using a lot of fossil fuels. And the big one, for example, is still burning coal. If between 2030 or 2050, up to 2030 for sure, 2050 we have to see. And then maybe some contribution from gas, then maybe from nuclear, and hydro, of course, will have contribution, bioenergy, solar PV, and other renewables would certainly have some contribution, but that's still not going to be the major one. So this is a BAU scenario, and then because you see, people have to understand that if we are or we want to decarbonize our transportation system, and if you want to use electrical vehicles, so therefore we have to decarbonize our electricity production. Many of you may be aware that, for example, from electric vehicle in a country like Norway versus a country like India, in a sense, the carbon, the contribution in terms of the greenhouse gases or other pollutants is going to be very different. You will find that maybe in country like Norway it could be very close to zero, but maybe in case of India it could be similar or maybe even higher than your conventional autonomy. So it will all depend for a country-wise country. So therefore, that kind of analysis and forecast is somewhat very important. And since how the electricity will also be influenced, it independently would also be depending on the different policies. And of course, our policy is promoting renewable energy for sure. But despite that, still the major contributor would be the coal in future as well. We wanted also to see extreme cases that how really this emissions from electricity would influence everything, especially the greenhouse gas emissions. So what we did is we looked some kind of extreme scenario, or you can say this is your limit, upper and lower limit. So for example, one scenario is electricity from the non-renewable sources. So that means everything is non-renewable in terms of next generation. Again, not so possible. But then second one is how about you produce coal energy from renewable resources. And the intermediate scenario, which is called scenario 2, which says half electricity from the renewable and another half from non-renewable, which is going to be a quite possible scenario in maybe by 2030. Not by 2030, but maybe it is quite possible to have it by 2030. Then the question is that electricity consumption per mile traveled by any vehicle, two-wheeler, three-wheeler. So that also is a very variable thing. Also is influenced by several factors, the size, but then we have to find that one-to-one basis, and then what kind of technology would come in future. It's a very evolving technology and it's going to change very fast. So therefore, some of these emission, in a sense, electricity consumption per mileage may change from one case to another, but maybe I don't know how much, but it is possible. Okay, so we have to consider several of those available information at the time of study. So this is how, for example, just to give you a sense that how different emissions in terms of gram per kilometer or passenger per kilometer will vary in terms of NOx, in terms of CO, in terms of PM, in terms of CO2. I don't want to go into detail into this, but every time it's not straightforward straight line. It is influenced by the vintage and many other factors, and then which kind of different policies we are gonna be implementing, especially for this electrical vehicles. I will skip this. It's in a published manuscript. I will give you the link. I can see. But let me come back to how these scenarios, especially the electricity generation scenario, would influence the emissions. So, for example, if you see the BAU scenario 2005, the emissions of CO2 emission are around 4 million tons. And by 2030, it's going to be around almost double. And again, for example, by 2050. If we have extreme electricity generation scenario, it may influence it. You can see very clearly 100% renewable or even renewable, that's going to be have a good impact. Maybe up to 40-50% of production would be in discharge. But let's say even if we have maybe a little bit less, if we have S2 scenario, which is half energy, half this thing, it's going to be somewhere in here. Now, there is going to be Other emissions would also be influenced, although in terms of decarbonizing transportation sector, others may not matter. But please remember that in country like India, in any kind of developing countries, we are also facing a lot of problem of air pollution and more specific of PM, especially in the cities and other areas. So we cannot ignore it. So therefore, it's important to study that component as well. So you can see that this PM 2.5, fortunately, there will be reduction in as compared to 2005 in almost all scenarios by 2030, 2050. So in a way, in a sense, we are becoming a little bit, or not little bit, we are becoming clear with respect to particulate matter, thanks to Bharat Stage 6, thanks to the new standards, power plants, and that we thought that anyway would be implemented by 2030, and therefore our electricity, even coming from coal, would be less polluting in terms of PM, etc. Now, what about the different policy scenarios? If you see, for example, the bottom one is for 2030 and the top one is for 2050. So if you see, as compared to we used to, you can see that except policy one, most of the scenarios will have reduction in the CO2 emissions. And if we can have a scenario which was policy 5 scenario, baseline, and further on S2, and that on S1, you can, we would be able to reduce our CO2 emissions by half or even more. So totally renewable would be, or totally carbon zero electricity would be really doing the wonders for us. But others also, in almost all possible scenarios, in all other scenarios also, or all possible scenarios, there would be reduction in CO2 emissions by incorporating electrical vehicles into the domain. Nevertheless, most of the policy scenario will also lead to some decrease in the CO2 emissions. Similarly, by 2050, again, the same story, as compared to 2030, it will be almost double. However, inside the scenarios, the right kind of policy would be able to reduce it to a different level, and electrical vehicles would be one of the major contributors. Please also remember that we have not modeled, let's say, policy 4 plus electrical vehicles. That was not done because that was in that time in the study we completed. This was not that much in research, but if you say that some policy 4 or policy bundle 2 along with electrical vehicles, there will be further reduction in CO2 emissions in the different scenarios. Same if we see, for example, as I mentioned, as compared to 2005, there will be reduction in PM 2.5 by 2030 and also by 2050. If you compare internal scenarios, that means alternate scenarios, you can see that again electrical vehicle waste strategies would reduce the PM emissions more than anything else. So therefore, it makes sense to in a sense to switch to electrical vehicle, provided we can also switch more to the renewable energy. Another thing which we did was that looking into the emission intensity, because all of you know that in COP21, it was the agreement for India was to reduce the emission intensity. Of course, the carbon neutral or going carbon zero is slightly new thing. So what we wanted to see that in terms of emission intensity with respect to per unit of GDP would be reducing the emissions. That means if you see by 2030, we have to reduce, or this is the earlier one, it's not valid now, but like heat reduction or emission intensity reduction by 33 to 35%. So that means what we did is we then forecasted the GDP of MMR, and based on then what is the GDP and what's the emission, we calculated the emission intensity. So very fortunately, in all our scenarios in future, our emission intensity would reduce. The one very simple reason is the way the economy of the country vis-a-vis of MMR specifically is increasing. Anyway, if we, so for example, the emission may increase by 2 times, but then economy may grow by 5 times. So therefore, it's a 20% or it's 1/5 of, or I don't know how much, but 1/4, 1/5 reduction in the emission intensity naturally or automatically. So emission intensity anyway, we will be getting very less, and similarly for more so for electrical vehicles, etc. So therefore, with respect to emission intensity, the city would be doing great. Okay, so that was as per our earlier commitment. And you can see in this slide that there is a considerable amount of emission intensity reduction with, in terms of per unit of GDP. And if you compare it with respect to base, it's gonna be with respect to 2005 put as a base, so it's gonna be up to 95% reduction in emission intensity in future in different scenarios, and more for electrical vehicle driven scenarios. So to conclude, what we did, we calculated the emission intensity. We calculated the emissions for different types of vehicles and the overall emissions for MMR. We forecasted, and that's based on the 4 travel demand modeling. Very comprehensive exercise, I would say. We were fortunate to have a CPS report and the data from MMR to do this study. So what is some of the conclusion? Maximum reduction in VKTs and subsequently in CO2 and other emissions for all horizon years. Policy scenario 2 has a maximum reduction in VKTs, and policy bundle 2 as well is one of the good policy intervention. If you want to have it, electrical vehicles, and is another policy intervention. If you want to promote the public transport, somewhat it is promoted if we have let's say PRTS kind of system. We have seen that there is no much shift from cars to buses, obviously because of different reasons. But then there is a shift from maybe 2-wheelers, maybe a little bit from taxis if we have a better PRTS kind of system. In some cases, there has been an increase in PM2.5 and NOx emission in the BAU scenario due to the electrification of vehicles. Yeah, because if you just go by BAU scenario, essentially because we depend a lot on coal and gas fired for electricity. Please also remember that in terms of the emissions, in terms of the PM emission, which is coming from automobiles, which earlier was thought too much, and it was a too big a reason for cities to have a problem. After Bharat Stage 6, these emissions, these PM emissions and CO NOx emissions are going to be very less, and therefore even the automobile, not with respect to CO2 but with respect to other pollutants, are very much cleaner than they used to be earlier. So therefore, now if you are not focusing and you are not generating clean energy and you're using coal power plant, your PM control is not up to the mark. Therefore, there can be more emissions from the coal-fired power plants as compared to your conventional automobile. So that we cannot forget that need to be considered. However, as you know that when you're flying a electrical vehicle, there are no tailpipe emissions. Therefore, city is much cleaner. And anyway, the PM and carbon monoxide, NOx emission are farther away from most of the time from the city boundary. So that kind of benefit still exists to even if there is a coal-fired power plant that we shouldn't forget. Among all four scenarios of electricity grid mix, VU and scenario 2, 50% non-renewable, 50% renewable, is the most plausible one, or I would say totally possible one. And others, maybe the scenario 1, 100% non-renewable or 100% renewable, are actually telling you the limit on the right and left side. In all scenarios, we got the reduction in emission intensity as compared to 2005. And that's, in a sense, a good news with respect to this. So with this, I end my presentation. Before I stop, I would like to acknowledge some of the contributions, especially KVK Krishna Rao and other faculty of civil engineering. They allowed us to use their software for doing the 4-stage modeling and helped us in many ways. MMRDA and other corporation suggesting us what should be done, and also providing us secondary data. Then there are many students, and Mr. Dikshit has contributed in this. Shant Sharma, Raj Siri, Aarti Sudhi, Sayali, they contributed toward this work. And I think 4 publications out of this, but these 2 are the one most relevant which I presented today. For example, one, our manuscript, will electrical vehicles be less polluting than the conventional automobiles under Indian city conditions? And very recently published urban transport emission and the current and mitigation policy scenarios. So feel free to contact me if you want to have them. And of course, the funding agency, Research Council of Norway, for this project, name of it was Climate and Transportation. So this is all I have to tell you today. Feel free to ask, or if you have any questions, comments, issues, feel free to say. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir, for an insightful session. So we have one question in the chat box. So the policy scenarios you mentioned after the Trans Harbour Link project is completed in Mumbai. Will there be similar improvisation?
I'm unable to hear you. Let me see if I can read the chat. Thank you for informative session. The policy scenario you mentioned after the Trans Harbour Link is completed in Mumbai. Will there is similar information in these policy scenarios? Yes, there will be improvement. Yes. So I mean, so why we do so many alternate policy scenarios? Because we do not know the future. So we always will end up somewhere in between. Therefore, we try to model possible extreme scenarios, and then policymakers and the others can take a call and a judgment that what is going to be the future under different circumstances. You're right. If any kind of improvement is done, it will be positive. Anyone?
Participants, you can unmute yourself and ask questions, or you can drop the questions on the chat box for the discussion. Any questions from the participants? Do feel free to unmute and ask the questions. It seems there are no questions and nobody is asking.
Maybe you gave them very heavy meals, so there's no questions. Is it online, Venkat, or is it?
It's hybrid mode, sir, online and offline.
Okay, so how many people are online?
Sir, it's like 10 people are in offline mode and rest are on in the online, sir.
Okay, so maybe you have to make them compulsory for people offline to ask questions. Anyway, so what's the next thing to, should I stop them?
Yes. Sir, there is a question, sir. They started.
Sorry?
The question came from Sudarshan. Have you done any study pertaining to the transformation of petrol vehicle to EV at different situations and different seasons?
Have you done any kind of study pertaining to the transformation of petrol vehicle to EV at different situations and different seasons? No, I mean, I didn't understand it fully, but if you are asking the what is the meaning of transformation here? So, petrol vehicle. If you are asking that, how about if we change from petrol vehicle to EV? If you're asking this question, moving toward EV, yeah. So that paper, the left side paper, will electrical with EV vehicles will be less polluting than conventional. That itself compared one-to-one basis for a city like Mumbai, what would be the emission in a conventional vehicle versus a electrical vehicle. So that's already done. You will see that for each vehicle, in fact, we have estimated individual emission factors, so anyone can actually use them and estimate emissions for any kind of vehicles. Of course, they are based on the what we call specific city, which is Mumbai in this case. But for other cities also, that is gonna be similar. So you can see in that manuscript how what will be the emission, what will be the different emission, PM, carbon monoxide, NOx, etc. in electrical vehicles versus contemporary automobile. Yeah, so that study is there. You should refer to this manuscript. Okay, have you done it at high traffic, less traffic? No, that's a very good question. We have done it for a peak hours based study, and that's how it is done. So therefore, it should be a. See, the problem is that there are now improving day by day. There were a few years ago there was not a lot of information that what will be the real mileage of electric vehicles under different conditions. And please remember, this is also changing very fast. So therefore, high traffic, less traffic conditions, or the energy usage in high traffic and low traffic electrical vehicles is not considered, but for automobiles it is considered. And as per as my understanding on these kind of different vehicles, electrical vehicles efficiency might not change that much with respect to high and low speed, because it's simply, as far as I know, it simply disconnect you from the motor and connect it immediately. So that stop go, and then in your conventional automobile your engine is always on. That is not the case in electrical vehicles. So therefore, in a sense, we have done it for conventional automobiles. We have not done it for electrical vehicles, but my sense is it will not change much. Okay. Can these policies be simultaneously extended to other cities? Yes, these can be extended. There may be because these are some of these policies are related to technology. Some of these are related to the infrastructure. So technology related policies or putting a fine, putting extra charges, it can be. Transportation infrastructure is a little bit different. That will be case-to-case basis what that need to be seen. But yeah, you're right. These policies can be implemented in the legislation. Okay, did I miss anything? Venkat?
No, sir.
I think it's covered everything. Okay, good. So then we can stop here. If there's no more questions.
No more
Anyway, you
questions,
guys can write to me and email me. Yeah, we'll be happy to answer questions.
sir. Before closing this session, there is one question that which will be pertaining to this particular theme. So since we are focusing on decarbonization of transportation systems, so how effective are the data sets that are available for us to conduct different life cycle assessment studies to convert them as evidence-based policies? So from a focus of Indian context.
Yeah, so there has always been an issue with the availability of data and existence of the data. Existence of data in many places was there, it is there. Availability of data has been a challenge, but I would say that it's possible to do it. There are many studies I know. Professor Dhu itself is doing that. Professor Dixit student is doing another study on the same line. Getting the infrastructure related data, all kinds of materials. That's a little bit challenge, and that cannot be taken from other countries also. But data, there always has been issue for getting the right kind of information. Is easing out slowly. Many times people struggle to get just the data, and many times just in this research because it is so hectic and so painful just to collect the data. But I would say it is improving, is what I can say.
Sir, connecting to this, if we see the reports that are being given by European context or Western world context, they don't have a mixed traffic systems that we see in the Indian context.
Yeah.
So how do we handle this condition of Indian scenario, where we have variation from north to south, east to west, and cultural habits change? So how do we bring all these particular aspects in developing a unified policy? Or should we go with a individual policy to the specific state wise? So, how can we convert them at the Indian level?
Yeah, that's a good question. Many things will be generic in nature, and then there is going to be something very specific. For example, because the transportation system in a city like Mumbai is developed in a different way. For a city like I don't know, for Kolkata, it may be a little bit different. So there is going to be a specific as well as generic policies. That's all I can say. You see, you can't change much also in a existing city. For example, just to scrap something and bringing new anyway is not going to happen. So we have to live with some of them. I would say that there would be partly generic and partly specific policies for policy.
Sir, and one final question.
Okay.
Sir, since as one of the leading researchers in the domain of life cycle assessment, how important it is for the Indian context to develop their Indian specific impact categories as well as the emission factors, and what could be the way forward for next 15 to 20 years to increase the think tanks on life cycle assessment for the Indian context?
Yeah, so that's a very good question. First of all, life cycle itself is a very important component to really understand what is happening with respect to any kinds of process, any kind of manufacturing for sure. And without having a good data inventory, it is many times an useless exercise. Because if you are not able to capture it appropriately, the impacts, so it doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any sense. For example, I want to do LCA for a specific thing in India, and it's very altogether different from what is happening in terms of the process, the usage, energy, etc. in the United States or in general in the world or even in European country. And I use generic or global emission factors or global factors. So that study will be totally an eyewash and use. Having said that, I think there is good improvement occurring on the database, India specific database also. My sense is that in many cases where it matters, that's available. For example, for cement, steel, for large component, these things are available. How accurate that needs to be seen, but it's, I mean, those are there, and therefore there would be some micro component which may be have some error and some not so accurate information. I think that at least we are trying to handle it with sensitivity, understanding whether the kind of hotspot we are projecting are they really hotspot or not. It's improving. That's how I think many of the developing countries would be. But we can have a system where we develop dedicated factors and all those NCA information for India at a faster pace. That really would be great. Then it's a lot of resources available, and I mean, some of these information, some of these academic institutions like yours are they are already generating, which is not necessarily a generic information, but very specific based on very specific research work done on different domains. So that challenge will remain there. I think some of the major ones are also covered. Okay, yeah, we are in the right direction. Maybe we can make a consortium and develop our own factors at faster pace.
Any other questions? So participants, if there are no other questions, you can mail Professor for your questions even later time. So we would like to thank Professor Munish Chandraji for taking a busy time out of his schedule and presenting his insights on decarbonizing the transportation sector and developing a strategic policy planning with scientific studies, combining both policy and scientific studies. Thank you, sir, once again, and hope for next time we wish to have on campus.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, sure. Okay, thank you, everyone.